Ashwini sir.
Yeah, you may proceed now.
Thank you so much, sir. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Department of Applied Psychology, I again welcome you on joining us for the second session of day 5 of the 2 weeks online refresher course in psychology. With deepest gratitude, I welcome the esteemed speaker of today's session, Professor Anand Prakash. Professor Anand Prakash, former head of Department of Psychology, University of Delhi, is a well-known academician across universities as well as corporate sector. Introducing a distinguished personality like him, who is honored by accolades and has contributed widely to the field of psychology, makes me question the relevance of the ceremony of introduction itself. Professor Anand Prakash has published numerous books, research papers, articles in journals of repute. Behavioral and management skills, language, literature are some of his interest areas. I'm sure the key observations he shared with us during the inaugural ceremony on impending concerns of psychology, like the frantic pursuit of objectivity, emphasis on adopting less structured indigenous approaches, and relevance of self-reflection in our times might have left most of you craving for more. Without further delay, I kindly request Professor Anand Prakash to share his valuable experience and wisdom. Sir.
Thank you, Rose, for a very generous introduction, and I'm thankful to Dr. Dharmen Tiwari and Ramanujan College for inviting me to share confusing thoughts. And I had requested Dr. Dharmen Tiwari to share the link so that I want to listen to Professor Mishra. And his speaking after Professor Mishra is either very courageous of me or I am a fool of first order. And I think I am both. I will be taking the agenda set by Professor Mishra, but I would start from certain observations, keen observations, which I have had in the last 1 year about us, about psychologists and about psychology students. I understand that most of the participants of this course, this program, is from psychology. I also assume that the participants are visualizing a relatively longer inning in the discipline of psychology. So I would be one person who has spent almost 4 decades in the discipline of psychology in a variety of capacities. So I would like to take the participants through a more reflective exercise, what psychology is doing and what it is happening. Professor Mishra delivered very academically, solid. Looking at in the past 1 year of this pandemic, that where the maximum grants of international funding and the national funding is getting allocated, what kind of field and discipline they are mentioning when they ask for the grants. And I'm looking both for national and international funding agencies grant in terms of identifying the areas of psychology. And they are mostly going into cognitive, neuropsychology, neurobiology, right? Or hardcore, what you call the advanced mental processes, which is normally known in the psychology, the advanced mental process. There is a great deal. The majority of grant allocations are going in that direction. Second, I also subscribe newsletter from certain international agencies which offer jobs in psychology across the globe, openings in different universities in Europe, America, and China and Asia, just to get a glimpse that in which direction psychology is going. And there also, if you just flip through cursorily, these newsletters, you will find that the maximum demand for teaching postdoctoral and doctoral students are mostly in the area of cognition, neurobiology, neurology, right? Or certain kind of hardcore neuroclinical elements they are asking. The third important thing is that, is going on, which I keep receiving demands from both the corporate world and the academic world to develop psychometric measurements for variety of tools and other kind of things. And I have done it for CBSE on the invitation of Ministry of HRD, which is called the National Aptitude Test. This is the one. So this is the one set of ideas which are is still expecting, world is expecting that psychologists will contribute, right, in the discipline of psychology as a natural science, something which is of a natural science. The second set of developments which are taking place in psychology is coming from the students' response pattern, which all of us who have the occasion and experience to teach students, if you ask a question to the student, the dominant pattern of response is that, sir, I feel that this is the response to this question. I said, you feel or think? They mostly say, no, I feel this is right. So even if you give an answer, so there is a more of, feeling driven perspective, which this generation is showing. So I have been questioning myself, is feeling is going to be the ultimate criteria for judging things right and wrong? And do psychology have an answer to this question? Anybody say, I feel it. And I see it happening at home. I see it happening in friend circle and others, where people are more, making feeling statements and they expect us to accept it. So the era of hardcore logic and mathematical formulation is getting replaced by the feeling formulation. I don't know. I'm just posing a question to you. And I think psychology is the discipline which must address. So this is the another set of observation that I have. The third observation, which is again, all of you must have known, that in the last 1 year, the entire world is undergoing a kind of pandemic. And pandemic has caused huge amount of uncertainty. And we all are searching for certain kind of, certainty or certain ground and moving toward attaining a certitude which will give us relatively stable answers to many questions, whether it is about relationships, about feeling, about thought, about thinking, about reality, about any other kind of a thing. And that's the, this is the one. And it means the demand for explaining the social reality is going up. And psychologists are expected not only to describe the social reality, but also provide certain kind of answers to this social reality. And finally, which I am finding as part of my observation reflections, that's the mental health challenges, right? If the moment you are known as a psychologist, people expect you to help them, irrespective of the fact that many of us also suffer from the mental health problems. But we are supposed to expected to be immune to all kind of afflictions coming from the mental health challenges. Now, these 5-6 observations related to grant research, right, or psychometric assessment, again, the same objectivity of the fluid reality and the student pattern of responses, demand for explanation of social reality, and mental health challenges, they are making me think about the discipline of psychology and what kind of future we are expecting it to, what kind of future course of action we can take it. Some part has already been covered by Professor Mishra. Some part I will try to bring forth in terms of, so I can see that I will be covering certain, I have covered some of the observations, reflections, and also certain patterns. So I see two kinds of patterns happening into this observation. One pattern is that the forces which are compelling psychology researchers and psychology teaching to move more toward the positivistic natural paradigm, which is called the natural science paradigm. toward that. And another one is that which is forcing us to move toward more of a social cultural kind of a paradigm. The greater detail has already been spelled out by Professor Mishra. That's how social and cultural understanding will enrich us further in making few assertions, making few theorizations that would be of some value in not only understanding but also explaining the real life phenomena. Now, this is not new, and as I told in my inaugural address, that there has been perpetual identity crisis with the psychologists. What do they want to do it? So I'm going to reflect something on that, and they can be making certain assertions of promises, and then I would like to question and answer. So I am dividing that 60% time I would be taking, and I would like to reserve 50% for the questions and answer, because I feel that is where I will also get an opportunity to learn something from the questions, because I think if I am answering all the questions myself, I am also killing curiosity. The good teacher, and I always believe, is not supposed to answer all the questions. So don't ever expect that whatever questions you will ask, I would be able to provide an answer to it. Maybe I'll further complicate it so that you search for finding your answer. Now there is a very interesting. This is the anti-crisis, because psychology, I see the way unfolding is the amalgamation of philosophy, sociology, history, right, neurology, neurobiology, physiology, and many other natural sciences. Now, psychologists attempted to bridge this gap between the social and the natural world by using conceptual tools of their time. They had certain kind of conceptual tools, and they used these conceptual tools to bridge this gap. But this bridge was not a very solid bridge. It was a very, very tight rope walking where we wanted to have a safety net, right? And so if you look into the philosophy of science, that is why Kuhn calls the psychology as a pre-paradigmatic science, because we have a very tight rope walking with a very light foot, and we need a lot of safety net to do it, right? Now, in the 21st century, in the modern century, there are in fact the central question, and every question can be reduced into these two categories. One, what is the relationship between mind and brain? And the second question is that what is the relationship between behavior and brain? And if you just use these two as axis, a lot of dilemma, conflict, and the paradoxes of psychology can be addressed to look at. Or the questions that I raised in the beginning can also be engaged. The brain, the way we understand it as the primary source of knowing, experiencing, and different other, basically functions by the process of categorization. And this categorization at times is a continuous, it is effortless, and at times it is relentless. Take, for example, the figure ground, right? The right, wrong, the appropriate, inappropriate, the adequate, inadequate, the certain kind of, it is good, it is bad, it is not. So all kind of a categorization takes place within that to do that. Now, the important thing is that how do these categorizations are helping us create a meaning? And that's the point which Professor Mishra already addressed, because he says is that whatever observations we do it, whatever understanding we give, that's generally observer dependent categories, right? So what psychologists offer, take for example, motivation, attitude, perception, sensation, cognitions, thinking, right? Whatever concepts was offered in psychologists was basically an observer dependent concept, and it was not independent. Look here, what I'm comparing with the natural sciences. In natural sciences, your theorization is not going to affect the occurrence of a phenomenon. Even if you theorize that the sun, right, rises from the west and not from the east, the rising of the sun will not be affected. But the day you discover the Maslowian thinking, the Maslowian theory, you start seeing the phenomena according to the aperture of a theory, right? So knowledge is some kind of concept dependent knowledge as well. Natural sciences, there is a phenomena, and human job is to discover that phenomena. create laws, and laws are the natural happenings. But in psychology, it is not happening. It is not happening because the phenomena is not independent of the observer. It is always dependent of the observer. So if you are observing, you observe it in one way, and I am observing, I observe it another way. So what way of achieving objectivity we are doing? We are trying to create objectivity into intersubjective spaces. So I see what Professor Mishra was referring to, right? That there is a one level of objectivity which we call the objective reality. One level of reality is called the objective reality, and the another level of reality is called the subjective reality. But there is a third level, and in third level, most of us live and transact our social, cultural, familial, and other kind of a life, and that is called the space for intersubjective reality. And I can give an example. I don't want to give a politically loaded example, otherwise I have many, that how this intersubjective realities are shaping, and sharing and shaping is shaping our destiny, right? Now, so two kinds of things are required from the psychologist. One, all psychological phenomena require both a description as well as explanation. So how descriptions can be provided, how does it happen, right? So what the natural world inclined psychologists, which are doing positivistic and others kind of research in neurobiology, neuropsychology, or looking more into the more scientific, gadget oriented, right? Which are saying that is it really possible to explain whole behavior and its connection with the brain in terms of firing of the neurons, the changes, the biochemical changes which are taking place? Because that is what the psychiatrists also believe, that if you go and tell a psychiatrist that I'm suffering from certain depression or certain kind of problems, so he will make a theory that based on the DSM classification, and say that there is certain kind of biochemical disturbance in your brain, and as a result, if the biochemical disturbance is restored, right, then your problem can be solved. So they will give pharmacological intervention to restore the biochemical imbalances into that. But in psychological sciences, if you are searching for that algorithm of the brain, that by showing a particular behavior, if you are becoming more nationalist, or if you are becoming more of a rebellion, or if you are becoming a revolutionary, or you are becoming a Marxist or a socialist, what kind of neurons are firing in the brain, and can an algorithm be written about it? So there is a lot of effort going on writing that kind of algorithm to decipher and decode that how brain is performing these operations. What are the mechanisms, right? Now, this, if it is decoded, then you can see that there is a certain amount of universality. So psychology seems to be, forced and dragged by becoming more universal, and universality appeal attracts many of us psychologists who are trying to do it. I remember some time ago, last year, the IBM Watson people who have created the artificial intelligence, who do a lot of diagnostics of the patient based on the analysis or based on the prescriptions given by the doctors. And they wanted to try similar kind of a thing for psychological illness or for the psychiatric difficulties or the challenges. No, so the effort is that because it is going to bring certain kind of certitude, certain kind of certainty in understanding the brain behavior connection. But my personal view on this is that if it is happening and likely to happen, in all possibility, the psychology will disappear. Psychology will no longer be there, because then it will not leave any space. All emotions, all feeling, memory, cognition, motivation, perceptions, and different other kind of fundamental processes, which are called the fundamental process of psychology, would be reduced in terms of biochemical and neuron firing. And some software engineer will write an algorithm, and they are doing it already. A lot of work is going on in decoding the emotions and the others, right, through the algorithm mechanisms. And you know that what will happen? People ask this scary question: what will happen if a computer acquires the capacity to emote. And there's a book, The Future of Business. He was one of the person who was the advisor in Obama administration. He has written Alec Roland, and he's saying that in Japan has invested very happily, Germany has invested in creating these robots which will take care of the people old age, the senile, because they are the countries where the population is stable or going down, and as a result, the old age people living longer because of the technological and medical advances, but there are no caretakers for them. And now the government has taken upon itself the responsibility of extending care to them, and therefore they are deploying human robots to take care of these people. So one of the freaks asking this question, what will happen if these people, right, fall in love with those robots? What will happen if the robots are also given capacities? And many films and fictions, look here, fictions are the one thing which make people cooperate. And this learning I have undergone and I've understood, because at times we often talk about the reality and we don't talk about the fiction. But I think fiction at times is a much bigger reality for people to foster cooperation, to come together and come to believe in certain kind of a things which in reality no longer exist. So this is going to be one direction where the psychology is taken. The another direction, which is the subjective experiences, is that, right? And here I think the which often talks about the, and here I am reminded of a work of a philosopher who say that, well, if our reality is going to be observer independent, the way artificial intelligence or the algorithm writers or the software engineers or the people who are working in the area of emotions and faciometry to detect certain kind of changes in emotion through certain machine algorithm or the machine learning, if that is going to be dependent, now if it is going to be independent of the observer, right? Now this is something which is to be created and is to be seen. And this category he calls is that this is a brute fact, and he uses a term, and I'd be happy to share this term, which is called the ontologically objective categories, which are observer independent as it is happening into the natural science, because this phenomena exists outside the human experience. Now, is it really possible to identify and locate certain kinds of, because even if when I look back in the early days of the cultural psychologists, they were talking about certain kind of biological universals, that when people get hungry, certain kind of biochemical or certain kind of neural activity takes place, which are universal irrespective of the culture and the other. But that's very contested kind of a view. And but nonetheless, the thinking had begun even at that time. So if the phenomena or the experience is existing outside the experiences of that, right, then let it be handled by somebody else. But in order to preserve and also to enrich psychology, it is very important that we, social scientists or the psychologists, stay focused. So that's the domain I would like, and I would like to invite others also to participate in that, in dealing with the observer dependent categories, right, which are invented and shared by human beings. And that is where I see a possibility and future for psychologists. Now, look here, this is very important to remember that when we create certain observer dependent categories, it serves certain kind of function. It fulfills certain kind of needs. It achieves certain kinds of goals and objectivity, and its validity, its functionality is established by consensual agreements, right? People are, take for example, if I say that I am citizen of India, right? As long as everybody agrees that I am citizen of India and there is a country exists and I derive my identity, get certain kind of privileges, certain kind of benefits, right? Have my passport and allowed to travel, and then I am stranded abroad, then my government and my country comes out to help me out and rescue me. So as long as these functions are served, right, then this ontologically subjective categories which are created within the observer dependent, but gaining its sustainability, gaining its acceptability because of intersubjective agreements, consensual agreements, which Moscovici, in his own formulation, calls it a consensual conspiracy. So we all have been, doing it. Take, for example, and this is very peculiar to know. Yesterday, I was having a panel discussion somewhere, and he said that why psychologists are conducting programs on anger management, and why we are not listening any program on love management. So he said this is something which again have to be taken up by some kind of positive psychology, that what can be done, how to express love, how to express anger. There is a lot many techniques and research have been given, but how to express love in the lighter side of the thing, that has never been taught and that has not been done, how that can be done, right? So in psychology, most of the things happen and most of the things exist by virtue of collective intentionality. Since there is a large amount of agreement among the people with the intention, because it serves certain purpose, ये काम आती है हमारे, ये हमारी कुछ जरूरत को पूरा करती है, therefore this kind of a things. Now what are the implications for psychology? That has to be seen. One is that take for example emotions. You may ask, or if you are a skeptic and you got to be critical in terms of thinking and reflection, you can say that, well, emotions like anger and sadness or a fear generally are taken to be observer independent categories. So skeptics will always raise an argument that if you are making a claim that most of the categories in psychology are observer dependent categories, then how do you explain the anger, sadness, and fear, which are generally positioned in the body of knowledge as observer independent categories? But the fact, if you go into the details of is that, but the fact is that they are also observer dependent on their perception. Professor Mishra has concluded a book, which are most likely to come in the June, published by Sage, and where I have written something about the culture and the emotions. And I found that how culture is critical and important even in shaping the occurrence and experience of anger, right? Because the anger, fear, or the sadness, no matter how much of a claim is being made, it to be observer independent categories, but the fact of matter remains that they can't exist without the perceiver. So they got to be perceiver for these categories to. Without a perceiver, there is only one internal sensation, right? A stream of physical actions that's taking place, right? And they are taking inside us, inside within that, and its various twists and turns taking place inside us are shaped by variety and host of factors which are part of our history, personal history, right? Now, this can vary, and as Professor Mishra has very rightly said that, it can vary in the context of the culture, right? So the culture, the cultural factors, the rules of the game, the normative system, right? Even if you are we even in conversation we say that this is not something you should not feel this. People making prescriptions that you should not feel this. Whereas the evolutionary psychologists, they say that feeling is something which happens to us. We do not choose. We only choose its expression, its behavior. But occurrence and emergence of a feeling is out of a choice, and most of these feelings occur to us to protect us, to care for us. So you got to respect it. Now, how you want to do it, how you want to express it, where do you want to take it, that is what need to be done. So the important part of the psychology, and that should be, I think, should be the mainstay of psychology. It's not based only on that I'm saying, because that is where I see a greater promise for psychology or for the future of psychology, where we can look at these observer dependent categories, which many call that these are ontologically subjective categories, right? And these subjective categories need to be seen at the intersubjectivity level, because the intersubjective level is a level which is shared by large number of people, and for all those people who shared it within a particular historical, temporal, spatial context, becomes their reality, and it is shared by the act of communication and many humans, right? And they also carry a certain overtones of feeling and beliefs. That is what this is the many examples can be given from the history, right, where the intersubjective realities are more prominent than the objective realities to do that. And you can recall, take for example money. We all had experience during the Notbandi, right? That once it is agreed that this particular denominator is no longer a legal tender, right? We lost faith in that money, and we run helter-skelter to get our exchange. Some of us were successful, some of us were not successful, but it was a complete loss of a meaning in the intersubjective arena. And similarly, the law, right? The good and the bad, the power issues, the ethics and morality, everything is located within that intersubjective spaces, which are shared by largely people, right? This is a very important part, and there are things that give meaning in life. So human being, the primary aspect of our existence is of creation and sharing of meaning, and that is where I think the psychology holds a promise for future, right? We would be very happy, right, to retain our values, right, retain our ethics, because they give meaning to us in life. But if the moment it tends to differ from the others, then there is a certain amount of discomfort, right? And we feel, and here I am able to quote a very famous saying by great educationist Humboldt of Germany, which says that the aim of education is to distill, right, the experiences and make it the distillation of the possible experiences of life is to wisdom. So how these experiences occurring into the subjective observer dependent spaces taken to the intersubjective spaces can be converted into some kind of a the wisdom which show us the sense of a direction, which also give us certain courage and convictions that need to be done into that. And related to this is the point that I was referring to, that in the era of humanism, and I think psychology is overloaded, where you look at therapeutic practices, you look at the counseling, you look at the student-centric education, which is the new slogan. They all are overloaded with the ideology of humanism. Humanism is said we have accorded so much because we strongly believe that humanism as an ideology has a potential to replace God. In many places, it has replaced God. So, or scriptures that you saw it, because look at the modern therapeutic practices, or remember your own counseling experiences. Someone coming and complaining about certain difficulty, the next question you ask that, how do you feel, right? And rather than giving a straight answer to the question, we often make the person enter into the deeper part of it and trying to give voice to those deeper realizations and deeper feelings. So I think when the students are responding to the question, I feel, and this I find that there is a pattern in the classroom that they are referring to their feelings. So I thought that is feeling something that need to be taken and attended much more carefully than what we have been doing. So I look at the historical developments that have taken place within the psychology against this question. It was a very a prominent experience, and I'm sure those of you who are teachers, you often see that, because if a student is feeling, right, do we have a right to question that feeling? Or should we accept it because as a person he or she is entitled to feel certain things in a particular way? So I see that how this knowledge, so knowledge earlier form, the knowledge was mostly coming from the scriptures and then given support from the logic, right? Now that was replaced by empirical data into some kind of a mathematical formulation. And that's the positivistic psychology Professor Mishra was referring to. So first, starting the knowledge activities was scriptures into logic. Then it changed in the due course of the history and the development of the knowledge domains, right? The empirical data into mathematics. And then the third formulation came, that is where I see the knowledge is equal to experience into subsensitivity. Now here, what is the meaning of experience and what is the meaning of sensitivity? You all know it. But just for the sake of creating that intersubjective sharing, intersubjective spaces, I think I would share my perspective that how do I look at the experience, right? I see experience as a combination of sensation, right, emotions and thought. So that's where I see the experience, right? And the sensitivity, because if the knowledge, from where the knowledge will come, it will come from the experience in sensitivity, right? Sensitivity means two things, right? Paying attention to my own sensations, what it is doing to my own emotions, and then what kind of thoughts are coming to you. And allowing these to change me, right? So if I'm allowing certain kind of a sensation, certain kind of feelings and emotions, and certain kind of thoughts, and allowing it to change with my, and that is what it is into a never-ending kind of a cycle, right? Experience and sensitivity is built into another, never-ending cycle. They are intertwined with each other. For example, I can't experience and have sensitivity, right, unless I have good amount of experience. And unless I have the good amount of experience, I can't have the sensitivity. And sensitivity is not an abstract aptitude, right? That can be developed by reading books or listening to the lectures or participating into other activities. But others say that sensitivity is a kind of practical skills, right? It ripens and matures by experience, by practice, right? So more we practice this sensitivity, which is the combination of experience, and then we find that it is creating certain kind of understanding, which is better than the earlier understanding. And the influence of humanism has given this perspective that it is a gradual process of inner change, right? So the feeling is becoming very important and pertinent to do that. And it also, because it also keeps changing, right? Now the change of the order or not being on the certain ground is also going to be an important point in our understanding, and that has to be taken into account. So the contemporary perspective, which I feel, and let's also see that one part of psychology, and that's right in the beginning, I said that the social part of, or the cultural part within us, the psychology, is going to rely very heavily for its knowledge on experience and sensitivity, right? Experience coming as a matter of reflection and other activities, right? And also building sensitivity around it. And this gradual process, right, will be offering us a better insights, a better perspective and better understanding of the human problems, and may possibly, and here I'm saying possibly, maybe leading to some kind of enlightenment. Now this is very important for building that, and for this brings us to the question of relating to our mental health. And I was reading an article which says that the mental health challenges of the people who are also doing it. And he said that if you have a capacity of self-reflection, if you are sensitive and you can learn from your experiences, then the possibility and probability that you will come out of your own low phase of a life or depressive phase of life is very high. in comparison to those people who are relatively low in these kinds of capabilities. So it's time that we move out from the the empirical data and mathematics. I'm not saying that's not important, and that's important. That's equally valid. But the future of psychology, where I see, right, the promise that I see, I'm not saying that this will not be doing. I'm not saying that the algorithm and the machine learning is not good. I am nobody to make a value judgment about it. But where I'm seeing a greater possibility and potential for psychologists and psychological researchers to go on is to enter into that experience sensitivity, and then combination of which, various permutations and combination of which may lead to a kind of a knowledge which will be better, which will be much better both for the purposes, and two end purposes: one for the description and another for the explanation. And that is what I visualize doing that. Here I would like to stop, take a halt, and if there are questions, I would like to take those questions without any promise that I would be able to answer all those questions. Rose?
Yes, sir. So participants, we are open to questions. We would love to have some questions so that we can further the discussion. So, sir, a participant has asked about your reflections on the identity crisis of psychologists, something that you mentioned in the beginning of your.
Okay. The identity crisis, that whether we are part of the natural science or we are part of the social science, soft science. That's the question. And you find that even in India, look at the data, in many universities, it is a part of science faculty, right? But if you look in certain other universities, it is a part of the social science faculty. Look into certain universities in Europe and America, it is a part of their biological or natural science faculty or natural science department. In Delhi University, it is a part of arts faculty. It has been combined with the languages. And that's very interesting. And Professor Mishra fought very vigorously. So anybody going to ask for a DST grant or any kind of a grant from funding agencies, they will not recognize you as because this will not be rooted through the faculty of science. This is the one element of reality that leads to some kind of identity crisis. Whether you get a degree of MSc, and many as head of the department and as an administrator, I have faced, that's the whether you get a science degree or you get an arts degree, because both enjoy different kind of a status in different job arena. This is the second point. The third point, which is a more substantial point for the identity crisis, is that now, if you are going to study a phenomena or follow a kind of method which would be completely sterilized, right, and completely objective, right? And me and Professor Mishra, we keep debating, we keep asking. In fact, he has been quite instrumental and a great catalyst in making me read and think along those lines, that how we can address this issue. So who am I as a psychologist? Am I the theoreticians? Am I the the practitioner? Because if you see in the other sciences, right, if you are doing a theoretical physics, or if you are doing a lab-based kind of a research, or you are becoming a kind of technocrat. So if you want to develop instruments and gadget into it, there is a very different. But in psychology, both things are happening simultaneously. First thing, like world of practice, the theory, it has to happen first in your head as a psychologist, and then into the world of practice, because it all depends on the observer or the participant. In fact, in one of the workshops, I say that why do we use the sample, the term sample? Why do we use term sample in a research? Is it really a very good expression? Because sample is generally used for inanimate objects, Why do we use term sample for the human beings? I'm still not being able to reconcile with this expression. Why can't we use participant? Why can't we use cooperators, or why can't we use fellows or the associates? Why do we use sample? Because generally we get a sample of medicine, sample of urine, and sample of a blood, and a sample of a grain, or a sample of a piece of a cloth, right? But so it is many of the vocabularies, many of the terminologies have been borrowed from the physical sciences, though we are not doing it. So many crisscross kind of a thing happening, which is not giving us a very clear sense of affirmation related to who am I as a psychologist. So that was the point I was mentioning, which is leading to a kind of identity crisis. So we are always searching our ancestors. We are always searching our, the genesis. Somewhere we have frozen a time in the history, and we say that when Lipizig perhaps and Wundt was the our father of the experimental psychology, because psychology that way could move to the path of becoming a science. But many question it that no, perhaps that was not it. Many historians have difficulty accepting it. So that kind of a debate ultimately is summed up as having an anti-crisis.
Thank you so much, sir, for elaborating on the point. There is one more question around artificial intelligence and how artificial intelligence can affect the future of psychology. On the same time, there is another question. So if you allow, I will.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So the participant is asking, with the upcoming development of algorithms of emotions and behavior and thought, will that make it a universal across the globe? And will the scope of studying cross-cultural attitude behavior, will that be kind of compromised? And what kind of consequences will this have on the universalization of cultures?
Well, my answer would be that let us scratch our imaginations together. I don't have a very definite answer all by myself, but I think a group of psychologists, and more so about the budding psychologists, who has a lot of future, right? Some of us have now very limited future. We have long past, to be precise. Now, let's just look at it is being happening because of certain kind of capitalistic and the market forces. And when we start thinking of building algorithm, we start seeing globe as a larger marketplace, right? And human beings as another kind of customers, or the agencies as another kind of a customer. So I see that once we are able to decode, decipher, right, and write an algorithm that if you have to get angry, right, this is the process which sequentially or circularly being followed, right? If you are sad, this is what is being followed. This kind of biochemical changes takes place. These are the catecholamines, right? And different kind of other biochemical formulations are undergoing a change. So once you are able to decode and write an algorithm, right, your emotions can become a product. It's like being used as a kind of iPhone. So maybe you can have a range, or so you want to feel angry, right? You can press this button and feel angry, because this will initiate that kind of a process within. So the agency or the observer dependent, or the agency which are residing in the individual and the human being, and we feel nonetheless that, well, I am master of my own emotions. I have, right, my own feelings. अपना कहने के लिए तो बहुत कुछ नहीं है, पर मेरी feeling मेरे पास अपनी है. Now, even that is being taken away, what else would be left with you? Then you are converted into an automaton. So if that is going to a future, because through this, it would be much better to control you. So the idea is not to liberate you. Idea is not to extend you greater freedom, because many of the humanists believe that if people have a greater freedom, if people have a choices of expressing themselves, realizing their own feelings, right, and reflecting about their experiences. These are the basic tenets of feminism. This all would be taken away and the agency will go into something else. Take, for example, just to corroborate through a very weak example, phone. Now you decide that it is the phone which is controlling you, or it is you who's controlling the phone. If a call or a message comes, you take your call. No, I will see it when I'm free. I will take the call when I'm free, right? Now, or you decide that no, I have to take this call, or some people are continuously, and they have a lot of justification doing that. So it has defined, this technology has defined our own relationship with the gadgets, with the instruments, with the kind of things which are happening around you. So if the artificial intelligence or the human emotions and feelings are decoded into artificial intelligence, right, then human becomes, right, a very divisible entity. It's no longer remain indivisible. The definition which is coming, that individual as a total and complete entity, because the term individual is being used, which cannot be further divided. Right now, but that will change. So individual will become divisible. Here is the Rose, whose emotions can be manipulated like this, whose cognition can be manipulated by like this, and whose other experiences can be manipulated. So I want to give you an experience of happiness, right? I can control it. So even all those kinds of things which have made you or which qualified you to be called an individual, I have my understanding that no longer be there with you, and it will be taken over by some other agency. So that's the one future. And perhaps psychology will disappear. Psychology will not have that kind of a future if you are devoted totally on creating an observer independent reality. So your emotions are no longer understood through your own experiential reality. Your emotions would be understood by a machine. And machine has a capacity to learn various shades of it, and a lot of amount of research is going into the machine learning. So that will not be the psychology. That would be some other subject taking place, because psychology should be focusing on the experience sensitivity, or what Professor Mishra referred as the consciousness. Now, a lot of debate is going on that why do we say that only human beings have a special ability of consciousness and imagination. Even the subhuman species like animals and others, and many researches and theories have gone that they do have a capacity, they do have consciousness to do that. Only thing is that they don't have a language and they don't have ability to organize themselves. The human being, the maximum power human being gets is by cooperation and organizations. And animal world do not organize and cooperate, right? And it is because of this cooperation and organizations, right, we have established our dominance over this planet. We are ruling this planet. We have marginalized every other living organism except this corona and pandemic which comes. And this is the reassertion that there is a very different way of understanding. Somewhere there is a deficit in our understanding about the life around us. It reminds us of. It also makes us humble to look at our own arrogance as a human being, that we know everything and we have conquered planet. And if this planet is not going to be sufficient for us, all countries are moving toward the other planet and searching, possibilities that how we can settle a colony of Indians on Mars, or whether we can settle a colony of Russians on Moon, or some Venus or something else. So all kind of a thing, because there is also a kind of desperation that this Earth and this planet is no longer viable and habitable to human beings. So there will be very different kind of a psychology between. That's what I think.
Thank you so much, sir, for elaborating on that again. Another question is from a participant, and the participant is asking, when experience is such a key factor of life, then why are we not satisfied to have that psychology? Why are we not satisfied to say that psychology is the science of mind?
We are saying, and there is a group of psychologists who are also saying, right? That it is a science of the mind, right? But the definition and the characterization of a science that we have chosen to adhere to, right, need a certain kind of a revision, a certain kind of definition. I think Professor Mishra already indicated about you that it is the science of the mind. And I would say that there is also a need to create, right, certain intentionality and intersubjective agreements around that. So if a group of psychologists can create, and those who have created it, they call it the science of the mind, right? Or the science of a behavior, or to do that. But the intersubjective realities and the intersubjective agreements with the intentionality to do and prove it has to be there. So if we cooperate and organize, that's the another keywords for making it a reality for at least for some generation, not forever, because no realities, intersubjective reality can remain forever. It can only be for certain period of a time into time and space for certain members of it, right, which agree. And if you do it as a science of a mind, right, with intentionality, at least it can become practical reality for many of us for some time. I'll not say forever, because there is nothing like it at all.
Thank you so much, sir. Another question is on the methodology that we use as in psychology. So the participant is asking to what extent mixed approach method will be an ideal way ahead, or should we test a given problem individually through qualitative means and then qualitative and then compare it, given the possibility of the time and space?
I think Professor Mishra partly answered it. I think what is the more important before methodology question is that what is that we want to research? What is my question? I think more time should be devoted on fine tuning, right? Chiseling the question rather than jumping onto the methodology. And if I'm very clear that for me methodology is a service provider, and service provider can't decide, right, what kind of services his customer need. It is the customer who has to decide. If I'm using that market physiology to make my point clear, although I'm not very friendly with that. But so if I am very clear as to what do I want, right, as Professor Mishra said that I want how many people are participating, the answer can be given in number. There's nothing wrong in giving a number, because the whole idea is to communicate. The idea of research and information is a basic function, and it must reduce uncertainty. If your research is not reducing uncertainty around the questions, right? Suppose I ask you a question that what time it is, Rose, and Rose says that same time as it was yesterday. She's answering, but she's not helping me reduce my uncertainty. So unless the uncertainty is reduced, I'm not feeling informed. So one of the basic functions of the information that it must reduce uncertainty. Unfortunately, majority of researchers in psychology are moving in the same circular order and not helping reduce uncertainty with regard to the question that we set out to investigate. So my first answer to you would be that look at your own question. And if your question can be answered, right, then choose a methodology. But if your question is something like that, what kind of people are participating in this? How many people are research scholars? Then there's a number. But what kind of research scholars, right? Or there's a faculty member. What kind of faculty member? Then naturally you have to go into description and you have to go into some explanation. How many of them have come because they are keen on learning something about psychology, and how many of them have come to earn their certificate as a compulsory requirement for their career progression. Now, if you are looking for, depending on the nature of a question, your methodology has to be decided in doing that. This is the one. Second important consideration for this is that what as a researcher, your own faith and belief is, right? Now, once you're, as a researcher, what faith and belief is related to understanding of the reality. Do you essentially believe that psychological realities are observer independent? They exist no matter where and how and when, right? No matter what kind of a context it is there, right? So if you believe, because the researcher's personal convictions and predilections play a very critical role in shaping the kind of methodology or making a choice about the methodology. But I think in most of the psychological researches, the questions are of mixed type, right? What is that? You want to know. How many are that? You also know. And how come they are like that? So I see, all three sets of questions often are an integral part of our research formulation. Therefore, I would suggest that choose your mixed method, but a word of a caution. Because since both of them are relying on different kind of assumptions about ontology and methodology, ontology and epistemology, what becomes a knowledge for one and what becomes the reality for the other. So knowledge assumptions, which is a part of epistemology, or ontological assumptions, which is the assumptions about the reality, that they are not often in concurrence. And the justification is that since we are not living in any unipolar reality, we also live into multilayer reality, and certain realities of our life are objective. Anybody can come and see it in the same way, right? Only its effect would be different for the others. And therefore, there is a greater deal of justification for such research formulations for mixed method. But if you are drawn, if you are attracted to a phenomena, a reality, which is a very unique in nature, very unique in nature, and it is not a prevalent reality, common reality, right? Like you want to see that how many dancers in this country have suffered from mental disease, or how many musicians have suffered from, or how many artists has a serious adjustment problems. You are driven by the uniqueness of the phenomena, and this demand a very unique kind of methodology. And then you will have to enter into the realm of qualitative methodology. It all depends on the uniqueness of the phenomena. And as a psychologist, we often get attracted by the uniqueness of the phenomena. And believe me, if you are attracted by the uniqueness of the phenomena, you will also have to choose a methodology which caters to that uniqueness rather than destroying its uniqueness, right? How many teenagers of the generation G relate with their parents? Now, suppose you want to do it, and you can do either both kinds of the things into the research, qualitative and quantitative, provided you have a very well established operational definition of love. Like if question is asked that do you love your mother, you can say yes. And if you have to operationally define it, how do you express it? So there are concepts in psychology which appear to very real but very difficult to operationally define. Happiness, same thing is happening to the happiness, right? As if happiness and sadness are the two polarities, but you can be happy and sad at the same time. And often I ask this question to the many, right? So many aspects of my life, I am not very happy, but many aspects I'm very happy, right? So happiness, sadness, and happiness, they can coexist together. And it is only the veracity of the human mind who can handle it and negotiate it. Time is up, Ro.
No, sir. I'm not sure. If you allow, we have more questions actually.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So there is one question on teaching, especially and curriculum. What should be taught to undergraduate and postgraduate students so that they can be able to aptly change, adapt according to the changing realities of the discipline. I'll repeat it again, sir, if it's not clear.
Yeah, it's I can understand what dynamics should be cobbled up in the classroom to make the undergraduate and postgraduate student better receptive, or at least appreciate some of the unconventional element within the psychology, for which I have and this answer is based partly on my own experience of teaching. And I don't want to offer a very universalistic principle of doing that, but I think it all depends on the kind of relationship that you develop with your own students. How do you want to take it, right? Are you developing a relationship where you are the only credible source of knowledge, or you also see that, well, I have the knowledge as a teacher, but there are many students who are not interested in accepting the knowledge, because a student is not an empty vessel. So you will have to first check. They're not empty vessel in which you can, put anything, whatever you wish to do it. So you will have to, allow their participation, make certain kind of assessment, that what are the ways you can create a cooperative society of learner. Is it really possible to create, because look here, the students are answering that what I feel. This is the dominant pattern. And I'm sure if you have taught, a student answer this way. Second thing, they also answer, if you ask them whose class is this, they often answer, this is the Rose ma'am class. They never say it is my class with Rose ma'am. Or it's never say that it is my class with GM sir. They often say it is GM sir's class. The ownership, the class is on the teacher. Now, if you create a dynamics where the ownership of the student says that, well, this is my class. After all, I have taken admission, taken the trouble, pain, tribulation of admissions, of doing all those kinds of things, and yet I continue taking it as teacher's class, right? So this is the very second point. So how we can create an ownership, create a cooperative community of a learner, where these intersubjective spaces could be enhanced. The same point I was saying in that the meaning you want to communicate, the meaning of a knowledge that you subscribe as a teacher, that you uphold as a teacher, the same meaning is now being communicated to the students, and they also see a value and meaning in the same ideations. So as long as this common intersubjective spaces are created and shared, then I think rest of the question, how they should be taught, how they should be motivated, what kind of things can be done. And I think the structural constraints of the semester, heterogeneity of the students is the bigger challenge to address, because there's a paucity of a time, and you don't have enough resources, time resources at your command to address different students use. So some of the examples that I give in the class, I know that 50% of students have difficulty connecting with those examples. But I don't have time to check out with the students that whether my example, right, for do that. So if the dynamics, cooperative learner and intersubjective spaces, and certain amount of understanding about the meaning that we subscribe as a teacher about the subject, if this could be communicated to the student, I think a better bridge is formed where you can go and come back at the same breath to do that.
Thank you so much, sir, for answering all the questions patiently.
I think Rose, I saw a question was popping up that is there a seat of emotion in the brain?
Yes, sir.
And this studies has been done with the brain damage and the split brain studies, and they found that yes, there is a seat in the brain, and that part is damaged. People have difficulty experiencing certain kind of emotions. So physiologically and brain-wise. And second thing is that you also know the role of hemispheres, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, right? And often in conversation among the psychologists, we say that please look at from the perspective of right hemisphere. Right hemisphere, which is the seat of the emotions, right? There is, or left, which is a more rational, more logical, right? More data-driven, and which believes into mostly the objective reality. Right, this is the left brain center. So the left brain and the right brain dominance also have a theory that makes you either emotional or very rational person. So there are people in their day-to-day perceptions, they feel before they're deciding things. So their decision making is decided. Like suppose you go and buy a cloth and you like the fabric, you like the design, right? And you feel the touch and you feel good, and it appeals to you, will buy it, right? You will, but there is another person who will look at the detail of the texture, who will look at the cost, and who will also look, that how much of a price tag, and compare. There is a more data driven kind of a thing, and both have certain kind of functions to say. So in short, in response to your question, there is a seat, there are parts in the brain which directly But the best part in the metaphor, it is called that's gut feel. And gut is somewhere below the belly button here. Gut, that's called. So gut feel, and most of us decide things on the gut feel. So gut feel is something which happens to us instantaneously. And over a period of time, we have learned to trust our gut feel much more than the logic that the frontal lobe creates or the occipital lobe creates the logic. But at times, it takes a lot of time for gut feel to travel to the left hemisphere and convert into logic. So we decide that this is my gut feel and I'm deciding it. So there is this kind of a thing happen, and but yes, there is a seed, because people whose brain and that part is being damaged have difficulty emoting and experiencing emotions. So it is being said. Now the question which is very difficult and that has not been answered. I have been searching for the answer. Maybe perhaps Professor Mishra has read much more than this. That where is the seat of consciousness in the brain, and where is the seat of the mind in the brain? Right? That question is still unanswered, and I would like you to invest some time in doing that. That from where the consciousness is being experienced, because psychology has also been defined of late as the study of consciousness as an integral part of it. Altered state of consciousness, unconsciousness, collective unconsciousness. A lot of these terminologies are floating and making psychology immensely popular to do that, but looking for a definitive answers to it in terms of, where is the seat, which part of the brain or the mind is controlling these part. I don't think those answers are still available.
Thank you so much, sir, for answering all the questions so patiently with so much of detail and elaboration on each of the points. I'm sure this must have been a very enriching experience for all of us. And like you rightly said, that this is going to be a reflective exercise. I think it was just not an exercise, it was a reflective journey for all of us, which will be with us for a very long time. I wish we could have taken, maybe we might have, missed out some questions, but because of dearth of time, we will not be able to. Again, thank you so much, sir, for highlighting all the important trends that are coming up in the field of psychology and associated fields, which will probably question the role of psychology and also as psychologists. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Rose.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Dharani.
It is always refreshing to listen you. Now, Grishwa sir has joined already. If you
Okay.
wanted to stay with us, then you are most welcome, sir.
I would stay and listen to.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So participants, we have Girishwar sir amongst us. Sir, it was such an enriching session that we have received a number of questions, and it has generated a lot of curiosities in the mind of the young scholars. So if you permit, I would like to let you know the questions that have come up and request you to kindly provide your answers for it. Thank you, sir. The first question is, if the nature of culture is complex and dynamic, then in our research, how can we control it?
How can we control it?
Control it. G.
Well, when you are using the term control, you have a sense that you want to see that whatever you are studying is not contaminated by anything else, and you study it in pure form. And most of the time we talk that extraneous variables related to instrumentation or process of a study have to be controlled. At undergraduate level, we talk about the various techniques of control used in experimentation. And we use randomization or removing the variable from the setting, or if it is not possible, then you make part of the design. That is also one way to control the variable. So these are the various ways. So you are looking at your research from this traditional angle, then the question of control comes. And I don't want to discourage, but I'm not sure what degree of control we have, right? I think my colleagues must have read about demand characteristics, that the subject or the participant perceives the research situation in one way and thinks that this is the desirable response, this should be given, and he prepares himself and does that. There are studies about experimenter effect. You know, experimenter himself or herself becomes a variable. A smiling face provides one, kind of stimulus which, in addition to your independent variable, is going to influence the behavior. So these are the complexities. The whole question of control is very difficult. What degree of control you have on external conditions or anything. This is one important submission, that it's a myth that you are able to control various things. It's a relative, consideration that you are able to take care of these variables, and you want to separate their effect, and you want to see even the whole design of analysis of variance is just to reduce the uh, systematic variance and error variance. You partition the whole variation in two categories, right? And that is the whole mindset. Now, why you are bothering about these things? So that you are able to decipher the real pure nature. But I don't think there is anything pure. You observe, and it depends on so many things. Change the condition, you will find something else. So it's very dynamic situation that you get in human research, right? So why you are bothering about, culture and its relationship with control? You have to bother about everything about controlling, how you are controlling. I think one should have courage to take culture as part of the design, part of the study, and see how cultural variation is contributing to the variation in observed behavior in our usual design. My response is this, that culture should not be considered as something to be excluded, is not something to be considered as a variable to be which is contaminating the results. We need to learn what culture is contributing to the creation of behavior, maintenance of that behavior, reinforcement of that behavior. I think that is most important thing. You see, I don't want to make any comment on politics, but those who are able to understand the cultural meaning, they win the election. They don't consider it as an extraneous variable. They try to see the meaning of it and respect and give space to that. And things change, behavior changes, results change. You can see that. So culture is something which helps to learn and explain variation. You don't have to bother about culture as a variable to be controlled. You need to see how culture can be incorporated in your studies. And as I have mentioned, there are different facets of culture. And you need to take into account that. Only then you are able to explain. You can't explain merely in terms of the baggage that you have from psychology only. You explain behavior on the basis of the various psychological attributes that you have created through your theory. I don't want to complicate the matter, but those theory has also their roots in culture. Most of the social psychological constructs that we use, they have their origins in Euro-American cultural context. Those theories have emerged in that particular, they are not culture free. It's a bogus idea to entertain that these theories are culture free. None of them. It's very important to recognize. Yeah. So instead of
Thank you so
controlling
much.
culture, one has to take into account as a contributor to variation in behavior, how it relates to behavior, how it systematically relates to behavior. That's more important. Yeah.
Ji, ji. Thank you so much, sir. Culture being the part and parcel of psychological investigation. So what are the effective ways to identify and manage mediating and moderating variables while conducting cross-cultural research?
You see, mediating and moderating, as we understand, is a way to organize our understanding of some phenomenon, right? We see that there are certain factors which determine, and there are certain factors which are determined, and there are some factors which operate in between the two, right? So the mediating variable depends on the major independent variable. If it is there, then the mediating variable emerges. For example, teacher's style of teaching, if teacher, contributes to the environment of the classroom climate positively, it may increase the self-esteem of the child, and that self-esteem contributes to the performance of the child, right? So teacher's behavior influences directly the performance and also by enhancing the self-esteem of the child. So the self-esteem will become mediating variable, right? And socio-economic context of the child, status of the child becomes a moderating variable, which is outside of the classroom, which is a broader variable. And you see that it moderates children coming from poor homes, rich homes, middle class, they show a certain pattern of behavior. So that may be a factor which is not related to the teacher's style of teaching. It is independent of that. That is the moderator variable. Okay. So you have to read and study culture to see what is the mediating variable and what are the moderating variables. First, you need to understand that. It's not merely that you take a theory and take some variable and put it as mediating and moderating and independent, dependent. I think it's important first to understand the phenomenon, how it operates in the cultural setting, then see what are the factors which are operating in such situation. So it's not only theory driven. It's a big problem that our studies are largely theory driven. You have a good idea in a theory and you just go, you take certain tools and you measure that. You don't see whether it is present or not. So sometimes I come across with the studies which explore certain new phenomena which was seen in a journal article published in France or in England or in America. And if you give a scale, you will get some response. Whether the phenomenon is present or not, you will get some response. And you will understand, oh, I'm measuring this variable. It's a big issue. First, you need to understand the reality as it takes place. It's very crucial. All the theories provide you a lens to view the reality, right? And you find that at times that lens is not appropriate for that reality. So you need to approach the reality as it exists. Only then you can take the step of choosing variables as moderator and mediator.
Thank you very much, sir. One of the questions that has come up is, in a multicultural country like India, how one could devise a standard tool to measure a certain behavior?
You know, there is a preoccupation with the idea of standard tool to measure. And that standard is defined in terms of the reliability and validity of a particular tool. I don't want to go into the troubles and problems with whole scenario of measurement, but can you say that once you have done a study and developed norm in 1985, let us say, and will that be applicable today? No. But we hardly bother about it. We have prepared the manual. In fact, psychologists have not given any attention to this idea that what is the duration, expiry date hoti hai na dawaon ki. But in none of the tests you will find any date that this norm will be applicable up to 85 में आपने research किया था, it will be applicable up to 95, 2005 or 90. Do you find anything like that? The time when the study was done, the place where it was done, right? Sometimes you don't mention it in manual. You hardly read it. It simply says that 200 persons participated in the study. Fine, that's all. So there are so much variation. If you go into the details, you will be in trouble. It's prima facie, you accept, oh, take care, it will work. You use that. I think it is very important, even in any tool, to check its reliability and validity before you go for study. And at times when the nature of variable itself has changed. I think the most important area of testing is intelligence. And there you can find n number of psychological tests, n number of theories. And the end point is that you have multiple theories of intelligence. There is no single idea of intelligence. So these theoretical constructs have been changing. Guilford has given 120 factors of intelligence. Earlier, you had verbal and non-verbal, performance test and this test and all that. You assume there is something inside which is present in you, intelligence, like your height and weight, you have intelligence, something like that. It's a big problem. We have not been able to decipher that. There are some arrangements, temporary arrangements that we have made. And we use categorization and we try to see certain patterns. I'm not saying that they are not going to help. They are going to help. But when you use the word standard, it cannot be a perfect standard. It's impossible in psychology. Right? Even at the time when it was prepared, it was not perfect. And for other groups, again, it is not perfect. So, plus minus, you need to see variations, what is taking place. If you really want to take up a good study, you need to check its reliability, validity, appropriateness of the tool. I will share a very small study or anecdote, whatever you want to call. There is a good test of anxiety prepared by our great teacher, Professor Durganand Sinha. Sinha's anxiety scale. And it's yes, no kind of tool where you get response. It's a manifest anxiety scale. Now there are 100 items and you can score whatever you get. Now there is, for example, an item that if you are riding a very fast vehicle, then you have some feel of anxiety or things like that. There are many, many items. Once upon a time, it was very important when people were used to see tanga and bullock cart and train and airplane. Now everybody is more familiar with, so fast vehicle is not a big problem. So the norms of culture have changed, the conditions have changed, right? So you may say yes or no, but whether it is anxiety provoking or not, you need to see it. So the various items, if you re-examine them, you will find that many items may not be appropriate to measure anxiety because you are living in a different world. It's a very different kind of situation. So standard tool which is applicable to the entire country, that claim cannot be made. You need to have norms for different groups in different regions. One cannot use the same thing everywhere, right? You need to see linguistic equivalence of the items, because the language variation is also there. You have so many languages. There are, more than 20 languages which are recognized as official language in Indian Constitution. So you need to see that variation, right? So it is very important to examine these variations and what are the implications of those variations. So the idea to have one standard tool for the entire nation, I don't think is applicable. You need to see and respect the variations which are present in different areas.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Can we take up the next question, sir?
Yeah.
Sir, could you please reflect upon the developmental changes in culture with some examples?
Developmental changes in, well,
Developmental changes as a response to cultural changes.
you can rephrase it, cultural differences and developmental changes. I wanted to mention that there is change in a particular behavior or value or any kind of psychological attribute with age, and that provides a strong basis to say that the change or the cultural position, that the difference is because of cultural variation. So the strength of the idea that there is cultural variation comes if there is different pattern of development in one culture and a different pattern of development in another culture. There are many such areas, and there are some interesting studies, particularly the variation which takes place in moral development, in the idea of self and person. And there are some very interesting studies. Right now I am tired. I had another lecture before this class, and so I will not, and you people must be also tired. I will just refer. There is an interesting study by Miller, Joan Miller, and she has compared the notion of person in India, Uriya, in the case of Uriya children and young adults, and she compared that with the change which is taking place in American children and young adults. And she has shown how the pattern changes. I think this study was published in 84 or so. And there are many other works which are available. in terms of pro-social development, what are the changes which take place. We have done some studies, undertaken some studies here in Delhi also in pro-social behavior with young children and also with adolescents. And we have tried to decipher the pattern, and we can note that right now I am not going to tell the exact nature of that pattern. We may share that some other time.
Okay. Thank you so much, Divya. Now we shall end the session by thanking sir. So please go
जी
ahead.
सर, जी सर, जी सर। थैंक यू सो मच सर। ये मेरा सौभाग्य है कि मैं आपको थैंक यू कर रही हूँ इस पूरे सेशन के बाद। सो थैंक यू सो मच। यू प्रोवाइडेड enriching insights in a number of important issues that are arising in the field of psychology. And then we as Indian psychologists need to take care of a number of challenges and issues so as to allow the field of psychology to develop and proliferate in the Indian context as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Now. Firstly,
Yeah, should we